"You're too old for Vegas," she said, brushing crumbs off her phone without looking at me. Just like that. 8 decades of living reduced to a punchline between bottomless mimosas and a spray tan appointment. I nodded, as grandmothers are expected to, but I didn't agree. The kitchen smelled like overripe bananas and too sweet perfume. Kimberly had dropped by to say hi, which meant 10 distracted minutes of texting and 1 cup of coffee she didn't finish. Her lashes were too long for her lids, and her nails clicked against the ceramic as she scrolled. "I'm going to Vegas this weekend," she announced, like she was breaking world news. "Girls' trip, spa, clubs, all that. But yeah, you know, probably not your scene." Not your scene. The words felt small, but they landed big. Not because I had dreams of bottle service or sequined heels, but because of what they really meant. You're done. Stay home. Be quiet. Be grateful we invited you to Thanksgiving. "Sounds like fun," I said. My voice still worked. It always does, when I let it. Kimberly glanced up, finally. "Anyway, I told Mom not to worry about you. We'll bring you something back." A pause. Maybe a keychain. She stood to leave. No hug, just a wave of fake acrylics. I watched her walk out like she was leaving a boring appointment, not her grandmother's kitchen. When the door clicked shut, I stayed at the table. The coffee was cold. I poured it down the sink. I walked over to the cupboard where I kept my late husband's safe. The old one, behind the flower bins. He used to call it our just-in-case fund. We were always waiting for some invisible emergency. Maybe this was it. I pulled out the worn envelope, opened it, counted. And for the first time in years, I asked myself a dangerous question. What if I stopped waiting? I'd never booked a flight without help before. Last time I'd flown, my husband handled everything. Printed tickets, carried the passports, even picked our seats so I could sit by the window. That was 17 years ago. But my fingers remembered how to type. My card still worked. I booked it for Friday morning, non-stop to Las Vegas. Not first class. I'm not delusional. But I did pay for a seat with legroom. The checkout page asked, "Traveling for business or pleasure?" I didn't check either. I packed 2 days early. Not just out of habit, but because I needed time to think. I laid each item on the bed like a question. Did this sweater say, "Still curious"? Did these shoes say, "Not dead yet"? I packed the navy blouse my sister always said, brought out my eyes. I packed the red scarf. James bought me the last time he remembered Valentine's Day. The night before the flight, I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. I listed everything I wanted to do. It felt silly, like homework for a class I hadn't attended in decades. Order room service, get a manicure, sit by a pool and not apologize for my thighs, dance. The list went on. Not wild things, not young things, just mine. I didn't tell anyone I was going. I turned off my landline, left a note for the mail carrier. I even pulled the curtain shut over the dining room window so no one would see the light and think to stop by. At 6:15 the next morning, I climbed into a cab with my carry-on and a bag of almonds. The driver was a young man with a beard and sleepy eyes. He called me ma'am and asked if I'd been to Vegas before. I said, "Not in this century." At the airport, no one looked twice. I was just another traveler. Boarding pass, ID, shoes in the bin. The TSA agent barely glanced at me, and for once, that was fine. I didn't want to be seen as a grandmother, a widow, a leftover. I wanted to be a person. I sat at the gate and looked around. Everyone had somewhere to be. Everyone thought they had time. My flight boarded at 8:40. By 8:42, I was in my seat, tray table up, hands in my lap. I stared at the safety card without reading it. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't scared. I was going. Airports are strange places when you're old. Everyone assumes you're lost or waiting for someone. A woman asked if I needed help finding my gate. I told her I'd already found it, and myself too, for that matter. The flight was full. Loud girls in matching tank tops were across the aisle, already sipping from tiny liquor bottles. I didn't mind them. They reminded me of Kimberly and her friends, except these girls had the decency not to dismiss strangers outright. The plane took off with that familiar roar. My stomach lifted. My heart did too. I looked out the window as the clouds swallowed the city I'd called home for 77 years. I whispered to myself, "Let it be the last time I leave it," feeling small. 3 hours later, we landed in Las Vegas. The air hit different the moment I stepped outside, dry, sharp, and unapologetic, like a woman who'd had enough. The cab line moved fast. I gave the driver the name of a hotel I'd circled in a magazine last month under an article titled "Where to Stay for a Grown Woman's Getaway." I'd torn the page out and folded it into my purse, even then not knowing why. The hotel lobby was all glass and chrome. Young men in golf shirts and women in sparkly sandals swirled around the check-in line. I felt invisible, but I also felt calm. It's a gift, sometimes, to be overlooked. You get to observe without being interrupted. When it was my turn, the clerk didn't blink. "Welcome, Ms. Howard," he said, handing me the key. "Elevators to your left." I liked that. Ms. Howard. Not Grandma. Not Ma'am. Just the name I was born with. My room was on the 12th floor. Clean sheets. A window facing the strip. A minibar with overpriced snacks and a note that said, "Indulge yourself." I sat on the bed and just breathed. Not out of exhaustion. I wasn't tired yet. I was grounding myself, reminding my body it was still mine. I changed into sandals and a cotton dress, pinned my hair up, applied a little lipstick, the kind my daughter used to say made me look too done. I didn't care. This wasn't for her. Outside, Vegas throbbed with energy. Lights, music, heat. Women in feathers handed out flyers. Couples laughed over slushy drinks the size of flower vases. I wandered, not with purpose, but with curiosity. I ended up at a rooftop lounge just before sunset. I ordered a drink, something with elderflower and mint. The waitress didn't ask if I meant to. She just brought it. The table beside mine held 3 women in their 60s, all with silver hair and loud laughter. One of them caught my eye and raised her glass. I raised mine back. "You here alone?" she asked. "I am," I said. She smiled wide. "Good. That means you're not waiting on anyone to ruin it." Her name was Gloria. The others were June and Marcia. They'd been friends since college. Every year they did a trip, just for the hell of it. "You should join us," Gloria said. I hesitated. Then I didn't. We talked for hours, about books, bad knees, old loves, good mistakes. I told them about Kimberly, not her name, but her voice, the one that said I didn't belong. Gloria leaned in. "Honey, Vegas isn't a place for the young, it's for the bold." It was past midnight when I got back to my room. My feet ached, my cheeks were warm from laughing. I peeled off my dress and lay back on the bed in my slip, staring at the ceiling. I thought of Kimberly, probably asleep in her matching pajamas, dreaming of nightclubs and filtered photos. And I thought, I didn't come here to be young. I came here to remember I was alive. I woke at 7:10, barefoot on crisp hotel sheets, the city already humming beyond the curtains. My back ached, but it was the good kind. The kind that comes from walking more than you should have, from sitting too long in unfamiliar chairs, from living. I made coffee in the little machine by the minibar. It tasted like cardboard and regret, but it was hot. I stood by the window in my slip and watched the strip yawn open. Street cleaners, delivery vans, women in last night's makeup. It was all beautiful. After a shower, I dressed slowly. Tan linen pants, a white blouse I hadn't worn since James's funeral. I'd kept it because it made me feel tall. Today, I wanted that. I slipped on my sandals and tied a scarf over my hair. The concierge gave me a map. I pretended not to need it, but took it anyway. "Anything you're looking for today, Ms. Howard?" he asked. He looked no older than 25. "Somewhere with shade and strong coffee," I said. He grinned. "Try Fremont Street, Old Vegas. It's got bite." He was right. Fremont was sticky and cracked, with neon that blinked like it had something to say. I passed a man dressed as Elvis who winked at me. Past a woman in her 70s who wore a bikini top and a feather boa. She looked like freedom. I found a cafe tucked between a tattoo parlor and a pawn shop. It had steel chairs and pink sugar packets. I sat outside, ordered a black coffee and a croissant, and wrote in my notebook. I wrote what I remembered. The smell of Kimberly's perfume, the click of her nails, the way she said, "too old," like it was a fact, not a choice. I underlined that phrase 5 times. A woman walked past in a wide-brimmed hat. She paused, then backed up. "Mind if I sit?" She was around my age, maybe older, with a soft Georgia accent and a face like folded linen. We talked for an hour. Her name was Laureen. She was in town for a divorce party, not hers, her granddaughter's. "I told her we'd get matching tattoos," Laureen said, sipping her iced tea. She thought I was joking. I laughed until my sides hurt. In the afternoon, I found a vintage boutique. Not one of those cutesy places with overpriced denim and ironic buttons, but a real secondhand store, full of coats that remembered stories. I bought a silk blouse the color of plums. It cost more than I planned to spend. I didn't care. By evening, I was back on the strip. The crowds were louder now, the lights braver. I stood outside the Bellagio and watched the fountains dance. Around me, couples kissed, children pointed. A man held up a phone to film. I didn't film. I just looked. That felt more sacred. Dinner was room service. Grilled vegetables, a glass of red wine, and a slice of chocolate cake. I ate in the robe, sitting cross-legged on the bed, my plate balanced on a hotel magazine. The TV played some reality show I didn't understand. The people on it screamed a lot. I turned the volume down and left it on mute. I liked the motion without the noise. I checked my phone for the first time all day. 5 missed calls, 2 voicemails, all from Kimberly. I didn't listen to them. I didn't need to. Instead, I opened my photo gallery and took a picture of my cake. Just for me. Not to post, not to prove anything, just to remember I was here, I existed. I bought dessert because I wanted to, not because anyone else wanted a bite. The 5th morning began slower, not because I was tired, but because I wasn't rushing. For decades, my days started with alarms. First for the kids, then for James's medications, then because routine had carved itself into my bones. But here, no one needed me to move faster than I wanted. I sat on the bed with my second cup of coffee and flipped through the hotel's paper directory, pretending to consider the spa menu. I wasn't sure I belonged in a place where women wrapped in white towels drank cucumber water. Then I remembered Gloria's voice from 2 nights ago. Vegas isn't for the young. It's for the bold. I called the front desk. Ms. Howard, we can fit you in for the desert renewal package at noon. Is that the one with the facial and the foot rub? It is. I'll take it. The spa was on the 17th floor. It smelled like mint and orange peels. A woman in soft sandals handed me a robe and said, "Take your time, dear." She didn't rush me, didn't look past me, didn't assume I was lost. The robe was thick and heavy. It made me feel protected, like armor, but softer. My masseuse was a tall woman named Ava. She had hands that knew grief when they found it, even in the shoulders. "Breathe," she said. "You're allowed to exhale." I did. For the first time in months, maybe years. During the facial, I almost cried. Not from pain, from kindness. From the strange intimacy of someone treating my skin like it was worthy of care, not just maintenance. Ava said nothing about wrinkles. She said, "Your skin has stories." Afterward, they gave me herbal tea and a cookie shaped like a flower. I sat in a room full of strangers in white robes and felt no shame. I looked at the women around me, young, old, loud, silent. None of them knew who I was, and none of them cared. That night, Gloria texted, "Drinks at the lounge? We're making June sing karaoke." I typed, "I'm in. Give me 20 minutes." I wore the plum blouse and my oldest black slacks, tied my hair in a loose knot, and added earrings I hadn't worn in years. Small silver hoops. James once said they made me look dangerous. I'd laughed then. Now I looked in the mirror and whispered, "Still dangerous." The lounge was dim and golden. A woman in sequins sang a slow version of "I Will Survive." Her voice cracked on the high note, and the room applauded like it was perfect. June was already tipsy when I arrived. She hugged me like we were lifelong friends. Marcia handed me a drink called the Widow's Whisper. It tasted like lime and fire. "Your turn," Gloria said, nodding toward the stage. I blinked. "No, absolutely not." "Oh, come on," June said. "What's the point of Vegas if you don't embarrass yourself a little?" I laughed, then stood. The DJ raised an eyebrow. I leaned in. "Something from the 60s. Surprise me." He picked, "These boots are made for walkin'." "Perfect," I sang. Not well. Not badly, just loud. My voice cracked. I forgot a verse. I laughed between lines, but I sang. And for 3 minutes, I wasn't someone's mother or grandmother. I wasn't too old for Vegas. I was just a woman in a plum blouse, singing in a smoky bar, surrounded by people who clapped like it mattered. When the song ended, Gloria whistled. Marcia cried. A stranger bought me a drink. I drank it slowly. Outside, the night was warm. Vegas didn't sleep, but I did, deeply, with the kind of sleep that only comes when your soul has stretched a little wider. I dreamed of waves, of fireworks, of Kimberly's face, puzzled, watching me walk past her in heels she said I'd never wear, and I smiled. The next morning, my legs ached from dancing, and my throat was rough from singing. But I felt light, as if some part of me had been unknotted in the middle of a karaoke verse. I pulled the curtains open and let the desert sun blind me a little. I wanted to feel everything. Room service brought oatmeal, toast, and grapefruit juice. I ate slowly, watching tiny people bustle on the street far below. I wondered if any of them were here for the same reason I was, to remember who they were before life took all the room. At 10, the front desk called. "Miss Howard, Someone named Kimberly has called the hotel multiple times asking to speak with you. I'm unavailable, I said. Calmly. They hesitated. Should we take a message? She already did, I answered. I'm just choosing not to read it. I hung up. My phone had been off for 3 days. I hadn't even looked at it since the chocolate cake. It sat on the nightstand like a guest I wasn't sure I'd invited. I didn't reach for it. Instead, I got dressed in the yellow blouse I almost didn't pack. I'd told myself it was too bright for my age, that it drew attention. Now I wanted that. Let it draw. I took a cab to the Bellagio Conservatory. Flowers bloomed in shapes, dragons, peacocks, entire villages sculpted from petals. I stood in the middle and let the color pour into me. No one hurried me. No one told me to move along. A child pointed at a butterfly display and said, "It's magic." I nodded. It is. From there, I wandered. Bought postcards I wouldn't send, just to keep. Sat in the sun and watched people pose for photos. One couple asked me to take theirs. I said yes. The woman was my granddaughter's age. She looked at me differently, not with dismissal, but curiosity. You here alone? Yes. That's kind of badass. I smiled. So I've heard. By late afternoon, I was back in the hotel lounge, not the rooftop one. This one was darker, quieter, jazz in the background, bartender in a vest, not a t-shirt. I ordered a Manhattan and paid in cash. I sipped it like something sacred. A man 2 seats down said, "Most people your age drink wine." "Most people my age do a lot of things I don't," I replied. He nodded, said nothing more. We sat like that, 2 strangers with quiet hearts. Eventually, he tipped his glass and left. I stayed. I thought of Kimberly, of the kitchen, of the way she'd looked at me like I was already fading. She was wrong. I wasn't fading. I'd just been folded, and now I was unfolding. Later, I wandered through the casino floor, not to gamble, just to watch. I liked the noise, not for the sound, but for what it covered. A woman my age won something. Not millions, a few hundred maybe. She screamed. Her friends clapped. One of them cried. I stood near them, smiling. Then I turned away before they saw me. I passed a luxury store with glass shelves and 2 white lights, purses lined up like museum pieces. In the window was a handbag I'd once seen in a magazine, the kind Kimberly circled in catalogs, the kind I told myself no woman over 70 needed. I went inside. The salesgirl blinked. "Looking for a gift?" "Yes," I said. "For me?" She showed me options. I pointed to the one in the window. It was butter soft and the color of worn honey. "It's a classic," she said. "So am I answered. I paid without flinching, not with a credit card, with my bank card. From the account James and I had called emergency savings. This felt like one. She boxed it, wrapped it in tissue paper, handed it to me like I'd earned it. Back at the hotel, I unwrapped it slowly, held it on my lap like a sleeping animal, ran my fingers along the seams. I thought, she's going to be furious. I thought, let her be. And then I thought nothing at all, just sat there in silence, in a room that smelled faintly of roses and dust, holding something beautiful I hadn't asked permission to want. That evening, I drew a bath. Not because my back ached, though it did. Not because I was tired, though I was. I did it because I wanted to sit in warm water, with no interruptions, no expectations, and no one asking what time dinner would be ready. The tub was deep and white and quiet. I brought in my new handbag and set it on the vanity, just so I could see it. A reminder. I'd spent decades carrying utility. Tote bags full of snacks, tissues, receipts, reminders. This one was different. This one said, You can want something just because it's beautiful. When I got out, I wrapped myself in a towel and padded barefoot across the plush carpet. The silence in the room felt earned, sacred, almost. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't open the drapes. I just let the quiet settle over me like a second skin. Then, for the first time all trip, I turned on my phone. It buzzed to life like it had been holding its breath. 12 missed calls, 8 voicemails. Kimberly, Kimberly, Kimberly. And a few from my daughter, Susan. I didn't listen yet. I scrolled the texts. Kimberly. Grandma, where are you? Kimberly. Did you seriously go to Vegas? Kimberly. Mom's freaking out. You're not answering anyone. Susan. Call me when you get this, please. Kimberly. Are you okay? Kimberly. Why are you being so dramatic? Kimberly. I checked the accounts. Did you really empty the trust? I sat very still. So that was it. I'd forgotten how tightly money ties people together. Not with love, with string. And when you cut it, they don't feel loss. They feel insulted. The trust, as she called it, was just an account. One James and I had built quietly, slowly. She was always meant to get part of it. Someday. But she'd spoken of it like it was already hers. She'd referenced it in front of friends, used the phrase "my inheritance" more than once, as if I were a bank account with a cardigan. I opened the voice messages, not out of guilt, out of curiosity. Kimberly's voice was tight, less concern, more control. Grandma, we need to talk. You can't just disappear and spend money like that. That account was meant for the future. The future. I deleted the message. Susan's voice was softer, but not kinder, just more practiced. Mom, if this is about what Kimberly said, she didn't mean it. Please call us. We're worried. They weren't worried when I was quietly fading into the wallpaper. They were worried now because I stepped out of it. I texted Susan 3 words. I'm not lost. Then turned the phone off again. The next morning, I booked a show ticket. Not one of the loud ones with acrobats flying over your head. A jazz singer, performing standards in a small theater. I wore my black dress, the one I'd nearly left at home, thinking it looked too formal. I added a brooch, lipstick, and walked out like I belonged. Because I did. The singer was a woman around my age. Her voice had rasp and power, the kind that only comes from survival. Between songs, she told stories about husbands who drank, children who forgot to call, days when she didn't know who she was anymore. The crowd laughed and sighed, and sometimes clapped too soon. At one point, she paused and said, "You know what they don't tell you about getting older? That you don't disappear. You just stop asking permission." I closed my eyes. That line didn't feel like a lyric. It felt like permission, granted. By me, for me. After the show, I didn't go straight back. I took the long way, walked past the fountains again, watched a street performer juggle fire, bought a paper cone of roasted almonds and ate them slowly, one by one. When I reached the hotel lobby, the doorman smiled and said, "Welcome back." And I realized I didn't need anyone to say, "You're too old," ever again. Because I had just proved to myself that I wasn't. The 8th morning began with silence. Not emptiness, but ease. The kind of quiet you stop noticing because your body finally accepts it. I stretched in bed, knees stiff but forgiving, and reached for my notebook instead of my phone. I flipped back to the first page. My original list stared up at me, neat and tentative. Order room service. Get a manicure. Sit by a pool and not apologize for my thighs. Dance. Every line was crossed out. I turned to a fresh page and wrote one word in block letters: more. More than food, more than rest, more than small permissions. That's what this trip had become. It wasn't a rebellion, it was a re-entry. I dressed without thinking too hard. A soft dress, sandals, a wide-brimmed hat I'd bought from a stand outside the Mirage. $5 and worth every cent. I looked in the mirror and saw someone I hadn't seen in decades, the version of me that used to dream, not defer. At breakfast, I sat outside. There was a breeze. The server poured my coffee and asked, "Are you celebrating something?" I paused. "Yes," I said. "Me." Afterward, I walked. No destination, just steps. Past couples with matching backpacks, past women in business heels and teenage girls with tangled earbuds. Nobody looked twice, and yet somehow I felt seen. Eventually, I found myself in front of a gallery. Not the big kind with velvet ropes, but a quiet storefront filled with watercolor deserts and metal sculptures made from scrap. A handwritten sign said, "Local women over 60. First show." I went in. The space smelled like dust and citrus. A woman with white braids stood near a painting of a dusty road. "That one's mine," she said. "Painted it after my divorce." He took the house. I took the light. We talked. Her name was Agnes. She'd started painting at 68. "Didn't have time before," she said. "Now I take all the time I want." I bought a postcard print of her work, not because I needed art, but because I wanted to remember her story and the way she stood, proud and unhurried. Back at the hotel, the lobby was busy. I passed a couple arguing about check-in times and two teenagers giggling over selfies. I stepped into the elevator and caught my reflection in the mirrored wall. No makeup, hat slightly crooked, smile real. That evening, I had dinner at the same restaurant Gloria had recommended days earlier. She and the others had gone home, back to Denver, Charlotte, Chicago. But I wanted to sit in that space again. It wasn't about the food. It was about the echo of laughter, the memory of a woman I'd almost forgotten. Me. I ordered a glass of red wine and the same grilled fish. The server said, "You've been here before." "Yes," I said, "but I'm new every time." As the plates were cleared, I noticed a woman 2 tables over staring at me. Not unkindly, just curious. She looked like she might have been 50, maybe younger, maybe older. She leaned in. "I hope this isn't rude, but are you here alone?" "I am." She smiled. "That's incredible." I raised my glass. "It really is." Later, in my room, I didn't turn on the television. I sat by the window and watched the lights blink in and out like the city was exhaling. I held the postcard painting in my hand and traced the road with one finger. Tomorrow, I would start packing. But not tonight. Tonight, I wasn't leaving anything. Tonight, I was simply here, whole, unhidden, and in full color. I didn't sleep much that night, not out of worry, but out of fullness. Like a good meal that lingered, this trip had settled somewhere deep inside me. I lay still, my hands folded over my stomach, staring at the hotel ceiling and thinking, this is what it feels like to belong to yourself. By sunrise, I was already up. I made coffee, stronger than usual, and drank it on the small balcony. Below me, the strip looked softer in morning light. Not loud, not flashy. Just streets and buildings and people, like any other city, before it put its costume back on. I dressed in the same linen pants I'd worn the day I arrived. They felt looser now, but maybe that was just me, taking up space differently. I packed slowly, folding each item with care. Not because I was sad to leave, but because I finally understood what I was bringing home. Not just clothes, not just receipts or souvenirs, but proof. Proof that I was still capable of joy, of choice, of more. When I zipped the suitcase closed, I glanced at the safe where my new handbag rested. I hadn't even used it yet. I didn't need to. Just knowing it was mine had been enough. At checkout, the clerk smiled politely. "Did you enjoy your stay, Ms. Howard?" "I reclaimed it," I said. He blinked. "Excuse me?" "My stay. I reclaimed it." He nodded, not understanding. That was fine. Not everything needs to be explained. The taxi to the airport was quiet. I didn't speak. The driver didn't ask questions. I liked that. Let the city go on without me. I'd taken what I needed. At the airport, I checked in and made my way to the gate. No one offered to help me with my bag. No one assumed I was fragile. I carried it myself because I could. I boarded early, not because of age, but because I chose the upgrade. Extra space, window seat, quiet row. Not luxury, just comfort, finally allowed. As the plane rose, I looked out the window. Vegas shrank below me, not as a place I was leaving, but as one I had conquered. I opened my notebook and wrote on a fresh page, "Be alone without being lonely. Spend the money, dance with strangers, ignore the guilt. Come back," I underlined that last one. I wasn't done with this city. Or with myself. The woman next to me glanced over. "Going home?" she asked. "Not exactly," I said. She smiled, not pressing. I liked her for that. When the plane landed, my phone came alive again. Kimberly. Susan. A flurry of messages and calls. The tone had changed. Susan. "Mom, please call. We're not mad, we're just confused." Kimberly. "Grandma, this isn't how we do things. You scared everyone." Kimberly. "What about the money?" I powered it off. I wasn't ready to share this version of myself with people who only wanted the old one, the quiet one, the giving one, the woman who waited. I would talk to them, but not yet. At home, the house was exactly as I left it. Still, dim, predictable, but I wasn't. I unpacked slowly, placing the handbag on the table like a guest. I brewed tea. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. Then I sat in my chair by the window and looked out at my quiet street, my soft lawn, the hedge I hadn't trimmed in months. I didn't feel old, I felt finished, with apologizing. I didn't open the curtains the next morning. I let the light filter in through the narrow gap, soft and silver, brushing over the carpet like it was asking permission. I sipped my tea, not out of habit, but because I wanted to taste something quiet. The house was still, but it didn't feel like a prison anymore. It felt like a space I'd chosen to return to. I moved through it differently now. Slower, straighter. Like someone who'd finally remembered her own name. By noon, I was dressed. Same black slacks. A blouse I hadn't worn in years, crisp white with pearl buttons. I ran a comb through my hair and added a dab of perfume. Not because anyone was coming, because I was here. And that was enough. Then the doorbell rang. I knew before I opened it who it would be. Susan stood on the porch, arms crossed, eyes tired. Kimberly stood just behind her, shifting her weight from foot to foot, like she had somewhere better to be. "Mom," Susan began, "we've been trying to call." "I know." "We were worried," she said, then glanced at Kimberly. "Really worried." I stepped aside. "You want to come in?" They nodded. Kimberly didn't look at me. She looked around the house like it was unfamiliar. I wondered when she'd last really seen it. They sat at the table. I didn't offer coffee. I didn't ask what they needed. I waited. It was Susan who finally spoke. We don't understand. You left without telling anyone. You spent so much money. You ignored every message. That's not like you. I smiled. You're right, it's not like me. Kimberly frowned. Then why? I looked at her. Really looked. 26 years old. Perfect nails, perfect teeth. Always planning ahead, always measuring. She looked afraid in a way she couldn't name, like someone who'd realized they'd built a life on the assumption that someone else would always wait. You told me I was too old for Vegas, I said. She blinked. I didn't mean it like, you did, I said softly. And it doesn't matter, because it was the truth, as you saw it. I heard it, and I decided you were wrong. Susan leaned forward. Mom, if this is about money, we can— It's not about money, I interrupted. It's about everything that comes before it. The way I'm spoken to, the way I'm dismissed, the way I've been treated like a placeholder in my own life. Kimberly opened her mouth, closed it again. I've given, I said, and I've waited. For birthdays, for invitations, for someone to ask what I wanted. Not once have I been asked what I still dream of. I'm 77, and you think that means I'm done. But I'm not. They were silent. It wasn't shock. It was recognition. Somewhere in them, they knew I was right. I went to Vegas because I wanted to feel something again. And I did. I felt joy. Freedom. I danced. I laughed. I met women who don't apologize for taking up space. Susan looked at the table. Kimberly looked at me. And yes, I added, I spent money. My money. Money that was always talked about as if it had someone else's name on it. But it doesn't. It has mine. Kimberly's voice came small. You spent the inheritance? I met her gaze. No, dear. I lived it. They didn't speak after that. There was nothing left to say. When they stood to leave, Susan turned to me and whispered, I'm sorry, Mom. I nodded. Kimberly paused. Are we okay? I don't know, I said honestly. But I am. She looked like she didn't understand, but wanted to. They left quietly. I returned to my seat by the window. Outside, a neighbor's wind chime clinked against the breeze. Inside, I breathed. Not with regret, but with relief. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in over 40 years. I took myself to breakfast. Not the kind you rush through, not the diner by the pharmacy, not something grabbed while running errands for someone else. I dressed in soft blue and pearls, left my phone in the bedroom, and walked 3 blocks to the cafe I used to pass and always say, maybe next week. The waitress called me darling and brought real cream for the coffee. I sat by the window and ordered the French toast, the kind that comes with whipped butter and too much syrup. I ate every bite. At the table beside mine, 2 young women were whispering over a phone. I think she's wearing Louboutin, one said. I looked at the heels. Red soles? Yes. Flashy? Yes. But the woman wearing them had bags under her eyes and a look that said she'd rather be anywhere else. I smiled into my coffee. You can wear the part and still not feel it. On my way out, the cashier complimented my brooch. I told her it had belonged to my grandmother. I didn't explain that I'd only started wearing it again last week. That I'd forgotten how heavy a tiny thing can feel until you wear it with purpose. At home, I sat at the kitchen table and opened the envelope where James and I used to store receipts. Not money, not bills. Just fragments of things we thought might matter later. Concert stubs, anniversary cards, a scrap of paper that once said, "Rain check on dinner. I owe you steak and a dance." I pressed that last one flat and set it on the table. Then I put on the radio. Not for background noise, for company. I found a channel playing something slow and brassy, the kind of music that fills a room without permission. And I danced. Alone, barefoot, in my own kitchen. I held my arms the way I used to when James spun me across linoleum. I moved like my joints didn't matter, like time hadn't passed, like I was the music and not the memory. I danced until the song ended. Then I sat down and cried, not from sadness, but from recognition. I hadn't lost myself. I'd just been quiet too long. Later, I opened the closet and took out the suitcase I'd brought back from Vegas. Not to unpack it, to pack it again. Slowly, deliberately. A pair of sandals, a sundress, my notebook, a guidebook with a map of Paris inside, circled in red ink from a vacation that never happened. I ran my hand over the spine and whispered, "Soon." Then I sat down and wrote a letter, not to Susan, not to Kimberly, to me. Dear Evelyn, you are not invisible. You are not too late. You are not a burden, a placeholder, or a memory in waiting. You are still becoming, and you have permission. I signed it, folded it, placed it in the drawer with my passport. Then I made dinner. For one, steak and potatoes like he owed me. And after I ate, I danced again. Because it was Tuesday. Because I was home. Because I could. It rained the following Thursday. Not a storm. Just that quiet kind of drizzle that makes the pavement smell like wet stone and memory. I opened the windows anyway. Let the breeze creep in and cool the corners of the house that had gone stale with silence. The rain made everything feel softer, even me. I made soup, not because anyone was sick or visiting, but because I wanted the scent to fill the kitchen. Carrots, thyme, garlic. Things that needed time, patience, heat. I stirred slowly, one hand on my hip, the other guiding the wooden spoon. I didn't rush. I let it simmer, like I had. The doorbell rang around noon. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened it to find a delivery man holding a parcel. "Evelyn Howard?" he asked. "Yes." He handed me a padded envelope. Small, nondescript. No note. Just my name in neat print. Inside was a keychain. Silver. Shaped like a tiny Las Vegas sign. Cheap. Probably from an airport souvenir shop. No note, no explanation. But I knew. I held it in my palm and felt the weight of it. Not much. Just enough to stir a memory. "We'll bring you something back," Kimberly had said. Maybe it was an apology. Maybe it was sarcasm. Maybe it was guilt, shaped like a trinket. I didn't care. I placed it gently in the drawer beside my brooch and didn't think about it again. That afternoon, I sat down with James's old financial folder, the one he used to keep under the bed in a locked tin box. I had the key now, had always had it, but rarely opened it since he passed. Inside were documents, statements, one last handwritten note from him. Just a list of numbers and a sentence. "In case you need it, it's yours. Do what you want." I stared at that line for a long time. For years, I had treated that money like it belonged to someone else. Kimberly, Susan, the family. But it didn't. It belonged to the woman he married, the woman he trusted, the woman he knew might someday need not just funds, but freedom. I closed the folder and placed it on the table, poured myself a glass of iced tea, sat in the same chair I'd occupied for birthdays, holiday dinners, and quiet weekday breakfasts. Only now, I sat differently, not waiting, not wishing, deciding. By evening, the rain had cleared. The streets were damp and shimmery under the glow of porch lights and puddle reflections. I put on a light jacket and went for a walk. No destination, just steps, just breath. I passed the bookstore where I used to buy novels I never finished. I passed the pharmacy where everyone knew my name and always assumed I needed help. I passed the park bench James and I used to sit on when we couldn't afford restaurants but still wanted air. And then I passed the travel agency. It was still there. How, I didn't know. People book online now, but the window was full of posters. Italy, Morocco, Canada, Greece, and Paris. The Eiffel Tower at dusk. Lights glowing, sky pink, like a soft bruise. I stepped inside. The bell above the door jingled. A woman in her 50s looked up from behind the desk and smiled. Not surprised. Not salesy, just kind. Looking for something? She asked. Yes, I said. Time. She tilted her head, thoughtful. Well, we sell the closest thing to it. I sat down. We talked. I didn't book the trip that day, not yet, but I asked questions, got details, held a brochure in my hand, and imagined holding a croissant in the other. It wasn't fantasy. It was planning. That night, back home, I laid the brochure next to my plate. I ate soup and read about Montmartre, about markets and music and balconies with iron railings, about women who wear scarves not for fashion, but for warmth. After dinner, I sat in my bedroom and pulled out James's list again. Do what you want. I whispered it aloud, and in that moment, I knew I would. Not just Paris. Anything. Anything that felt like mine. Because I hadn't lost time. I had simply paused. And now, I was pressing play. The next morning, I took the brochure and placed it on the kitchen counter where the bills usually lived. It deserved a better place. I opened it to the centerfold. A photo of a narrow Parisian street, cobblestones wet from rain, cafe chairs turned inward like they were waiting for someone to return. I stared at it while I poured my coffee. I didn't feel afraid. I felt calm, like when you finally leave a job you've outgrown or throw away a dress that never fit right in the first place. I called the travel agency just after 9. I'm ready, I said. She remembered me. Her name was Joan. She asked if I wanted a package or to build the trip myself. Myself, I said. I want to choose. And I did. I picked the small hotel, not the tourist one. I added a walking tour of gardens. A cooking class. I upgraded the seat on the plane again, just like I had for Vegas. Not first class. Just a little room to stretch. A little room to breathe. When I hung up, I felt something shift in my chest. Not panic. Possibility. Then I opened the other folder. The one with my will, the house deed, the financial records. I spent the next hour sorting, making new copies, adding handwritten notes in the margins. I wasn't being morbid. I was being thorough. All my life, I had been told to plan for after. I was finally planning for now. I folded everything into a new envelope and wrote 3 words on the front. Handled. Go live. At lunch, I made a salad and opened the window. The air smelled like spring dirt and neighbors' lilacs. I thought about James again, not with sadness, but with understanding. He'd known. He'd always known that one day I'd have to live without him, and that when I did, it should be real living. I touched the edge of his last list. I added a line of my own underneath, and when you do, don't apologize. In the afternoon, I drove to the mall. I hadn't done that in years, not because I couldn't, but because I convinced myself I had no reason to. Today, I had one. I walked past the stores filled with fast fashion and noise, past the shoe aisles full of stilettos and sneakers with names I didn't know. I stopped at a boutique near the far end. Soft light, slow music, racks of linen and silk in natural colors. A young salesgirl smiled without pity. Looking for something special? No, I said. Just something honest. She helped me find a coat, navy, belted, warm. The kind of coat that says you're going somewhere, not just running errands. I tried it on in front of the mirror. It didn't make me look younger. It made me look present. When I paid, she asked if I wanted a gift receipt. No, I said. I'm keeping it. I stopped at the salon next. My hair had gone too long without care. I didn't want a makeover. I wanted to be seen. The stylist was a man in his 30s with kind eyes. He washed my hair like it mattered, cut it like he was sculpting, and blew it dry into soft waves. He didn't talk much. I liked that. When he spun the chair around, I stared for a moment too long. Not because it was unfamiliar, but because it was exactly right. At home, I stood in the doorway with my new coat still on. The house looked the same, but I didn't. And that changed everything. I made tea and sat in the garden. The daffodils were coming up, little yellow mouths peeking through tired earth. I thought of the first spring after James died, how I'd pulled the curtains shut and told the flowers, not this year. This year, they bloomed anyway, just like me. When the sun started to drop, I went inside and packed again. Not the whole suitcase, just a start. A notebook, a scarf, the postcard painting from Agnes, and James's note. I placed them in the bag gently. Then I sat at the kitchen table and lit a candle. Not for remembrance, for anticipation. Paris was 3 weeks away, but I had already arrived. The days leading up to Paris felt like something sacred, not rushed, not loud, just quiet preparation, like the slow tying of a ribbon or the last deep breath before stepping into a pool. I didn't tell anyone the exact date of my departure, not out of secrecy, out of peace. The suitcase sat by the door, half-packed. Every day I added something. A pair of shoes I could walk in without pain. A book of poetry I used to love. A compact umbrella. My notebook. The handbag from Vegas. One morning, I added a photo. Not of James. Not of Susan or Kimberly. Just a snapshot of me, taken by Gloria on that last night in the lounge. Mid-laugh, face flushed, eyes alive. I didn't know she'd taken it until she texted it weeks later with a message that read, "You look like you just met yourself again." I printed it and tucked it between 2 pages of my journal. One afternoon, Susan called. I answered. There was a long pause before she spoke. "How are you, Mom?" "I'm well," I said. "I saw your travel post. You're really going to Paris?" "I am." Another pause. "That's brave. It's overdue. She exhaled. "I want you to know I didn't mean to make you feel erased." "I know," I said. "I guess I thought you were settled, safe, predictable." "I was," I replied. "But safety isn't the same as living." She didn't argue. Then, softer. "Is there anything you need?" "No," I said gently. "But thank you." She didn't say she was proud. That would have felt forced. But before we hung up, she said, "Send pictures?" "I will." Kimberly texted 2 days later, a single message. "I've been thinking about everything. I hope Paris is wonderful." I didn't reply. Not yet. Some things don't require a ribbon, just time. That week, I walked through the neighborhood each morning. Same streets, different rhythm. I noticed things I hadn't seen in years. A crooked fence with ivy, a yellow mailbox painted with cartoon bees, a neighbor's toddler trying to balance on one foot. Each step was quiet proof. I'm still here. One evening, I made myself dinner. Nothing fancy, just roasted chicken and greens. I lit a candle, poured a glass of wine, and sat at the table in my good sweater. For dessert, I took a slice of cake from the freezer, saved from some forgotten celebration. I ate it slowly, smiling, because this was the celebration. That night, I wrote letters. Not goodbye letters, invitation letters. To Gloria, thanking her for her laughter and her bravery. To Agnes, letting her know her postcard hangs by my bed. To myself, again. A second letter, shorter this time. Dear Evelyn, you didn't fade. You opened. Keep going. More is waiting. And you're ready. I placed it on top of the first letter in the drawer beside my passport. The night before my flight, I stood in the doorway of my bedroom and looked around. The same walls, the same lamp, the same quilt James had picked out with me 25 years ago. But I didn't feel trapped. I felt returned. To myself. To possibility. To the version of me that had waited patiently all these years for the door to unlock. And now, I was stepping through. The morning of my departure, the world was quiet. That rare, velvet kind of silence that wraps around you when something is about to begin. I didn't rush. I showered, dressed, and made myself breakfast. Toast, tea, and one perfect clementine. I ate standing by the window, watching the sky turn from ink to ash to light. The suitcase was packed. The taxi was scheduled. There was nothing left to double-check. I walked through the house slowly, not like a farewell, but like a nod. To the sofa that had cradled so many quiet evenings. To the kitchen chair where I'd once cried over bills and boiled water anyway. To the mirror in the hall that had watched me go gray. Not all at once, but gently, like snowfall. I paused by James's photo, not to say goodbye, just to let him know. I'm going, I said aloud. You were right. I needed this. And then, quieter. Thank you. The cab arrived on time. The driver was a young woman with braids and a denim jacket. She loaded my bag with care, then looked at me and said, Paris, huh? Yes, she grinned. That's pretty damn cool. I didn't answer. I just smiled, deep and sure. The airport was a blur of motion and metallic voices. I moved through it slowly but confidently. I had nothing to prove, no one to keep up with. I checked my bag, cleared security, and found my gate with half an hour to spare. I bought a coffee, sat down, opened my notebook, wrote, This isn't the end of the story. This is the sequel I didn't know I'd earned. The flight boarded on time. The seat was comfortable. The man beside me was polite and quiet. I liked that. We lifted off just as the afternoon sun warmed the wing. I watched the land disappear beneath us and whispered, Let me land different. We touched down in Paris as the sky turned gold. The airport was busy but not frantic. I moved through it like someone who had done this before, because in a way, I had. Vegas had been the test flight. This was the journey. A driver met me at the gate with my name on a sign. Madame Howard, he said, tipping his cap. I nearly laughed at the formality of it, but it felt right. He drove me through narrow streets that glowed under street lamps and early evening hush. I saw the Seine flash between buildings, the spires of churches, the blur of bicycles and cafe tables and linen curtains. The hotel was small, just as I'd chosen. Ivy-covered, quiet, dignified. The clerk spoke soft English and handed me a key with a real brass tag. Bienvenue, she said. In the room, I opened the window. The street below bustled with soft noise, clinking glasses, low laughter, the hum of mopeds. I didn't unpack. I didn't turn on the television. I stood there, hands on the sill, and let the air in. I didn't take a picture. Some things you don't need to capture. Some things you just keep. That night, I walked. Down one street. Then another. I found a bakery still open and bought a tart wrapped in wax paper. I ate it with my hands while sitting on a bench near a square full of music and strangers. No one looked at me twice, and I had never felt so seen. The next day, I visited a market, bought cheese I couldn't pronounce, and a baguette I broke with my fingers. I spoke slow, terrible French, and no one laughed. A woman with a green scarf complimented my brooch. I thanked her, said it was from home. She nodded like she understood, and every day after that, I woke early, dressed slowly, and walked without purpose. Some days I visited museums. Others I just sat in parks, watching old men play cards and young women drink wine in the sun. I wrote. I ate. I listened. I became. And one evening, my last, I sat on the steps of Sacré-Cœur with a bottle of water and my notebook. The city sprawled below me like a secret I had finally been trusted with. I wrote one final letter. To Kimberly. Dear Kimberly, you said I was too old for Vegas. You were right. But not in the way you meant. I was too old to be ignored. Too old to be dismissed. Too old to keep waiting for permission. So I went. I lived. I chose. And you will too, someday. I hope you do it sooner. Love, Grandma. I folded it. Left it in my notebook. Not to send, just to know it had been said. On the flight home, I didn't sleep. I watched the sun rise again over the wing. Same sky, different woman. When I landed, the customs agent looked at my passport and smiled. Welcome back. And I said, thank you. But what I meant was, I never left myself behind again. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you of your mother or grandmother or the quiet parts of yourself, share it. Tell someone. Start your own trip. And remember, you are never too old to return to yourself.